I never thought a single favor could change the course of my entire life. When I look back now, I realize it wasn't the favor itself that changed me, but the way I saw myself afterward. It all started on a quiet Sunday morning in the big old house I used to share with my family. My parents were away on a business trip, and for the first time in years, the mansion felt empty. Except for me, and her. Her name was Rena, our maid. She was kind, soft-spoken, and always efficient. I didn't pay her much attention most days, she was just part of the routine background of my life. But that day, everything shifted. She had been working since dawn, dusting the corners of the hall, wiping windows, doing everything she usually did without complaint. But when I passed by, I noticed something strange. She looked pale, exhausted, almost trembling. I asked if she was okay, but she smiled in that forced way that told me she was not. I told her to rest, but she refused. She said, "If I stop, sir, the work won't finish." The way she said it made me feel guilty. Maybe it was the silence of the house, or the fact that for once, I was seeing her as a person instead of just the maid. I told her to sit down, and without thinking much, I said the words that would change everything. "How about I take over for a bit?" She laughed, thinking I was joking. "Sir, you? Clean? You don't even know where the mops are." She was right, of course. I didn't. But something about the way she said it made me stubborn. Maybe I wanted to prove something to her, or to myself. I told her, "Then teach me." She stared at me like I'd lost my mind, but eventually, she agreed. "Fine, sir," she said, "but you'll have to dress properly. You can't do my job in that fancy shirt." She was joking, but I didn't back down. "Then lend me your uniform," I said. She froze. "You can't be serious." But I was. She hesitated, then said softly, "If you insist, but don't blame me later." We went to her small room near the back of the house. For the first time, I noticed how small it was: a single bed, a worn-out mirror, a few neatly folded clothes. She handed me her spare uniform, a simple black dress with a white apron. "This one's clean," she said, avoiding eye contact. I hesitated too. The idea of putting it on felt absurd, even a little humiliating. But something inside me said, "Do it." Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe pride. Maybe fate. When I changed into it, I expected laughter, embarrassment, something. But instead, Rena looked at me strangely. "You actually look," she paused, convincing. I didn't know how to react. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My hair was messy, my expression awkward, but there was something unsettlingly real about the image. It didn't look like a joke anymore. It looked like someone else staring back at me. At first, I tried to play along, wiping tables, dusting shelves, sweeping the floor clumsily. Rena sat nearby, guiding me with tired amusement. But as the minutes passed, something shifted. The longer I wore that uniform, the more natural it felt. My movements slowed, my voice softened when I spoke to her. It was as if the clothes carried a presence of their own, changing how I behaved without my permission. She noticed it too. "You're taking it seriously," she said quietly. "Maybe too seriously." I laughed it off, but my heart was racing. When she went to rest in her room, I stayed in the hallway, staring at my reflection again. The apron, the soft collar, the way my posture had changed. It didn't feel like a costume anymore. It felt like a version of me that had been waiting, hidden, uninvited, but alive. I couldn't explain it, not even to myself. When evening came, I made dinner, something I hadn't done in years. Rena woke up, surprised to find the table set. "You cooked," she said. "Well, I tried," I replied. She smiled, genuinely this time. "Maybe you're better at this than you think." We ate together, and for the first time, there was no wall between us. Just two people sharing a quiet meal, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. That night, after she went to sleep, I found myself standing before the mirror again. I hadn't taken off the uniform. The house was silent, the moonlight spilling through the window, and I just stared. There was something hypnotic about it, the way the light hit my face, the way the fabric moved when I breathed. It was like I was seeing the truest version of myself for the first time. The thought terrified me. I quickly changed back, folded the uniform neatly, and left it by her door. But when I tried to sleep, I couldn't. My mind replayed every second of that day, every strange flutter in my chest, every glance from Rena. I told myself it was just curiosity. Just a strange day. Nothing more. But the next morning, Rena knocked on my door, holding the uniform. "You forgot something," she said. I told her I didn't need it, but she smiled in a way that made me uneasy. "Maybe you do," she said softly, and left. From that moment, I realized I had opened a door that wouldn't close again. The next few days were a blur. I tried to forget about that strange afternoon, but the image of myself in Rena's uniform wouldn't leave my mind. I went about my usual routine, answering calls, checking emails, pretending everything was normal. But deep inside, something had shifted. Every time I saw Rena working, bending over to clean the floor or folding laundry, I felt a strange mixture of guilt and curiosity. It wasn't pity anymore, it was something deeper, something that made me want to understand her world. She didn't bring up the incident again, but I could tell she hadn't forgotten either. There was a quiet knowing in her eyes whenever she looked at me. One afternoon, as I was coming back from a meeting, I found her waiting by the door with her arms crossed and a mischievous smile. "You remember how you said you'd take over for a bit?" she asked. I nodded cautiously. "Good," she said. "Because I need your help again. My cousin's wedding is this weekend, and I have to go for 2 days. I can't leave the house unattended. You said you could handle things, right?" I laughed nervously, realizing what she was implying. "You mean, you want me to be you?" She smiled. "Why not? You already know how to wear the uniform." At first, I thought she was teasing, but she wasn't. She explained that no one would really notice the deliveries, the phone calls, everything was routine. "Just make sure the place doesn't fall apart," she said. I should have said no. I should have laughed it off. But something inside me, the same restless curiosity from before, said yes before my mind could stop it. When she left the next morning, she handed me a neatly folded uniform and said, "Try not to enjoy it too much." I chuckled awkwardly, but when I went back to my room and unfolded the dress, my hands trembled slightly. It felt like holding a secret. I told myself it was just practical, just for a couple of days, nothing more. But as I put it on, button by button, I felt that same strange calm wash over me, like I was slipping back into a familiar skin I hadn't realized I missed. The first few hours were awkward. I moved cautiously, afraid someone might see me through the window. But soon, the rhythm of cleaning, organizing, and working around the house became strangely comforting. I started humming softly as I swept the floor, catching glimpses of myself in the hallway mirror. It didn't feel like pretending anymore. It felt natural. I even started mimicking the way Rena spoke to herself when she worked, soft, patient, almost musical. Later that evening, one of the neighbors came by to drop off a package. She saw me at the door, hair tied up, apron on, and didn't even flinch. "Oh, Rena," she said with a smile. "Tell your sir I'll return the books later." My heart nearly stopped. She thought I was Rena. My instinct was to correct her, but something stopped me. Instead, I just nodded and said, "Of course, My voice came out softer than I expected. She smiled and left without a second glance. When the door closed, I leaned against it, heart pounding. I couldn't believe it, she hadn't recognized me at all. It was thrilling, terrifying, and intoxicating all at once. For the rest of the evening, I kept replaying it in my head. The next morning, I dressed again without hesitation. The act no longer felt like an experiment. It felt like an escape from the expectations, the pressure, the version of myself I had to maintain every day. On the second day, something unexpected happened. The gardener came early and called out from the gate, "Rena, could you bring me some water?" I froze. Then, without thinking, I answered, "Coming," and walked outside, carrying the jug like I'd done it all my life. He didn't even blink. We talked for a few minutes about the weather, about the plants, and I realized I was smiling, genuinely smiling. For the first time in years, I wasn't performing for anyone. I wasn't trying to be perfect or strong or impressive. I was just me. That night, I sat by the window in Rena's uniform, watching the city lights. I thought about her, about how invisible she had been in my world, How I'd never noticed her tired hands or her quiet pride. And yet, in just 2 days of living her life, I felt more peace than I'd felt in years. I began to wonder if maybe she understood something about simplicity, humility, and purpose that I never did. When Rena returned, she found the house spotless. "I'm impressed," she said, laughing. "Maybe you should keep the job." I laughed too, but inside, her words stung a little because part of me wanted to. As she unpacked, she noticed the way I kept glancing at the uniform hanging neatly by the door. "You can keep it," she said softly. "It suits you more than you think." I didn't know how to respond. I just nodded. Days turned into weeks. The house was quiet again, but I couldn't resist the pull. Every now and then, when Rena went out, I'd slip back into her uniform for a while. I told myself it was just habit, just a reminder of those peaceful days. But deep down, I knew it was becoming something else, a craving for the simplicity and honesty I found in that disguise. One evening, I was in the middle of dusting the shelves when I heard Rena's voice behind me. "You still do it?" she asked softly. I froze, my heart hammering. I turned to face her, ready to explain, but she didn't look angry. Instead, she smiled a sad, knowing smile. "I thought so," she said. "It's not the clothes, is it? It's how they make you feel." I didn't answer. I couldn't. She walked closer, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Sometimes," she whispered, "it takes pretending to be someone else to finally meet yourself." Then she turned and left me standing there in silence, shaken by the truth of her words. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her words echoed in my head over and over. Was that what this was? Not a joke, not an escape, but a discovery. I had spent my whole life trying to fit into a role: the responsible son, the businessman, the man in control. But in that small borrowed life, I had found something real. Something I didn't know I was missing. And yet, the more I embraced it, the harder it became to balance both sides of myself. The people who knew me started to notice subtle changes: my calm tone, my neatness, the softness in my expressions. They couldn't pinpoint what was different, but I could see the questions forming in their eyes. Rena noticed too, but she never said a word. She just kept working quietly, occasionally glancing at me with that same mysterious smile, as if she knew what was coming long before I did. I told myself I was still in control, that I could stop anytime I wanted. But the truth was, I was already slipping. The line between me and the version of myself in her uniform was blurring fast, and I didn't know which side I truly belonged to anymore. It's strange how quickly life can spin out of control without you realizing it. One moment you think you're managing everything just fine, and the next, you're standing in front of a mirror wondering who you've become. By the time I reached that point, I was already too deep to turn back. I told myself I was just helping Rena, keeping the house in order, experimenting with something harmless. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true anymore. It had stopped being about helping weeks ago. It had become an obsession, an escape from a version of myself that I didn't even want to be anymore. The first real sign that things were going wrong came one evening when Rena told me she'd be taking a short vacation to visit her family. "You'll be fine without me for a few days," she said, smiling like she already knew the answer. I nodded, trying to sound casual, but inside, I felt a rush of anticipation I couldn't explain. The moment she left, I went straight to her room and opened her wardrobe. Everything smelled faintly of lavender and detergent. I hesitated for a long time before touching anything. But eventually, I reached for the familiar black dress, and before I knew it, I was wearing it again, apron and all. This time, though, it wasn't about pretending to be her or helping with chores. It was something deeper: a need to feel the calm, the balance, the peace that I'd lost somewhere in my real life. I found myself talking softly to the empty house, mimicking her tone without realizing it. I even tried to do my hair the way she did, carefully tying it up, checking my reflection again and again. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't just see myself in her clothes anymore. I saw a different person entirely. Softer, calmer, but somehow stronger. That night, I decided to cook dinner the way she used to. I sat at the table afterward, eating alone, the ticking clock filling the silence. It felt strangely normal. So normal that when the doorbell rang suddenly, I nearly dropped my spoon. I froze. Through the window, I saw a man standing outside my father's friend, Mr. Shah, who sometimes came by to drop off papers. Panic surged through me. I couldn't answer the door like this. But he kept ringing, louder each time. Finally, I took a deep breath, adjusted the apron, and opened the door slightly. He smiled politely. "Ah, Rena, your sir isn't home, is he?" My heart was beating so hard I could barely speak. "No, sir," I managed to say softly. "He's away for a few days." "Ah," he said, handing me an envelope. "Please make sure he gets this." I nodded quickly, keeping my head down. "Of course, sir." He smiled again and left without a second look. I closed the door and stood there, trembling, realizing that once again, someone had believed the illusion completely. But this time, it didn't feel thrilling. It felt terrifying. Because for the first time, I realized I didn't just look the part, I was acting it flawlessly. I had slipped into that role so naturally, so completely, that even I was beginning to forget where the boundaries were. Over the next few days, I kept the act alive. I worked, cleaned, and even started to use her perfume without thinking. Every little detail became part of the character I was unconsciously building. But something inside me was cracking. I started having strange moments where I'd look in the mirror and forget who I was supposed to be. I'd hear someone call my real name in my head and flinch, like it belonged to someone else entirely. Then came the moment that truly broke me. Rena returned earlier than expected. I was in the living room, wearing her clothes, humming softly while folding laundry. I didn't hear the front door open. I didn't hear her footsteps. I only heard her voice quiet but sharp. "You didn't stop, did you?" I froze, the pile of clothes slipping from my hands. When I turned, she was standing there, her expression unreadable. "I told myself you might try it once or twice," she said softly, but this, her eyes scanned me slowly, and I saw the disappointment in them. "What are you doing to yourself?" I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. "I don't know," I finally whispered. "I just feel more like myself like this." She looked at me for a long time before sighing. "You think wearing my clothes makes you free? It doesn't. You're hiding. You've built a world where you don't have to face who you really are." Her words hit me like a slap. "And who am I, then?" I asked, my voice breaking. She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "Maybe you don't know yet. But pretending to be me won't help you find out." She left the room, and I stood there, unable to move. The silence that followed felt unbearable. For the first time, the clothes on my body felt heavy, like they were suffocating me instead of freeing me. I wanted to tear them off, but when I looked in the mirror again, I couldn't. The reflection staring back looked too fragile, too real, too me. The next few days were awkward. Rena avoided me, speaking only when necessary. I tried to stay away, focusing on work, but my thoughts kept drifting. The house no longer felt peaceful. It felt haunted by my confusion, my guilt, my longing. Every room seemed to echo with the memory of who I'd been pretending to be. One evening, Rena came to my study. "I'm leaving," she said. I looked up, startled. "Leaving? What do you mean?" She sighed. "I've had another offer. Somewhere far. I think it's time." I wanted to stop her, to apologize, to tell her she couldn't go because I needed her presence to keep myself from falling apart. But I didn't. I just nodded. She left 2 days later, and the house went silent again, truly silent this time. For weeks, I wandered through the empty rooms, aimless. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't work. I felt lost, like the house itself had become too big for me, swallowing me whole. Then one morning, while cleaning out her room, I found something on the desk, a small note written in her careful handwriting. It said, "You don't need to wear someone else's life to find your own. But if you do, promise me you won't lose yourself in it." I sat there staring at those words for what felt like hours. I realized I already had lost myself. I didn't know how to go back to being the man I was before. Every shirt I wore felt wrong, every mirror reflection looked incomplete. It wasn't the uniform I missed, it was the version of me that had felt kind, gentle, and honest. The version I couldn't seem to reach anymore. And that was when the real trouble began. Because once you lose sight of who you are, The world notices. My colleagues started asking if everything was all right. My friends said I seemed different, distant. I tried to smile it off, but inside, I was unraveling. Nights became harder, filled with dreams of the uniform, of Rena's voice, of a simpler life I could never have again. It was like being trapped between two worlds, one I could no longer stand, and one I could no longer return to. And in that lonely in-between, I began to realize something terrifying, that maybe I hadn't just switched roles with Rena for a day. Maybe, somewhere along the way, those roles had switched permanently. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. Every corner whispered her name, every shadow carried her presence. It had been weeks since Rena left, but I couldn't escape her influence. The silence was unbearable, and the reflection in the mirror had become a stranger I barely recognized. I tried to return to normal life. I shaved, wore my suits again, attended meetings, but something about it all felt hollow, like a performance in a play I no longer believed in. People noticed the change, though no one dared to ask. I could feel their eyes on me, confused by my softer voice, my calmness, my distance. I wasn't the man they remembered, and the truth was, I didn't want to be him anymore. One evening, I returned home after a long day of forcing smiles and pretending everything was fine. The air in the house felt thick, heavy, almost suffocating. I walked through the hall and paused by the doorway of Rena's old room. The door creaked open with a sound that made my chest ache. Her room was still the same, simple, small, quiet. Her uniform hung neatly behind the door, exactly where she'd left it. For days I'd avoided looking at it, afraid of what it might mean if I touched it again. But that night, I couldn't resist. I reached for the fabric, running my fingers over it slowly. It felt like touching a memory, soft but haunting. Before I realized what I was doing, I was holding it against myself, the scent of lavender filling the air again. The weight of the fabric in my hands brought a strange calm that I hadn't felt in weeks. I didn't change into it, not yet, but I just stood there, holding it close, feeling the quiet return to my chest. That's when I heard it. A knock on the front door. My heart skipped. It was late, too late for visitors. I placed the uniform back on the hook and went to answer it. When I opened the door, I froze. Standing there was Rena. She looked different, brighter, calmer, dressed in simple clothes that somehow made her look more confident than I'd ever seen her. "You didn't expect me, did you?" she said softly, smiling faintly. I shook my head, still stunned. You came back. "Only for a few days," she said. "I forgot a few things." She looked past me into the house. "But it looks like you've kept it exactly how it was." Her eyes lingered on the spotless floor, the carefully arranged decorations. Then her gaze moved to me, reading my face like she always used to. "You haven't been okay, have you?" I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped aside to let her in. She walked through the hall, her steps slow and quiet. It was strange, the house felt alive again the moment she entered. She turned toward her old room, opened the door, and stopped. The uniform was still hanging there, the folds perfect, untouched. "You kept it clean," she said. Her tone was unreadable. "I didn't want to forget," I said softly. "Forget what?" she asked, looking at me with those calm eyes that could see through anything. I took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "Forget who I became when I switched places with you." It was the first time in years that I felt at peace. I wasn't pretending to be strong or important. I was just human. Rena stood silently for a while, her gaze softening. Then she said, "You think peace comes from wearing an apron and sweeping floors? No. It comes from letting go of everything that makes you feel small and empty. You didn't find peace because you were pretending to be me. You found it because you stopped pretending to be the man everyone expected you to be." Her words hit harder than I wanted them to. She wasn't accusing me, she was freeing me. But freedom can hurt when you've been hiding for too long. I turned away, staring at the window, my voice trembling. "I don't even know who I am anymore." She came closer, placing a gentle hand on my arm. "Maybe that's a good thing," she said quietly. "Maybe it means you're ready to start over." We sat together for a long time that night, barely speaking. The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It was peaceful, like we both understood something that didn't need words. Before she went to bed, she turned to me and said, "You can't run from yourself forever. Sooner or later, you'll have to decide who you really are. Not for me, not for anyone for you." When I woke up the next morning, she was gone again. She had left early, leaving only a note on the table. "Some things can't be undone, but they can be understood. Don't be afraid of what you found in yourself. It's not a mistake, it's a beginning." For a while, I just sat there staring at her handwriting. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Then I went to her room again, and there it was, the uniform, still hanging in its place. I stared at it for a long time, the morning light catching the edge of the fabric. I thought about everything that had happened the first day I wore it as a joke, the days that followed, the confusion, the shame, the strange comfort. And in that quiet moment, I finally understood what she meant. It wasn't about the clothes or the role. It was about permission, the permission to let go, to explore, to be something beyond the labels I'd trapped myself in. I didn't put the uniform on that day. I folded it carefully, placed it in a box, and set it in my closet. But the calmness it gave me stayed. Over the next few weeks, I started to rebuild myself slowly, quietly, differently. I spent more time doing things I'd ignored before. I cooked, cleaned, listened to music, visited people I'd neglected. I smiled again, genuinely this time. I didn't feel like the man I used to be, but I didn't feel lost either. I felt real. Months passed, and I learned to live with both sides of myself. The world didn't fall apart, and no one needed to know the full story. It became my secret, one that grounded me in ways nothing else ever could. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd take out that box again, open it, and look at the neatly folded uniform. I wouldn't wear it, but I'd smile at it like an old friend. It reminded me of the lesson I'd paid dearly to learn, that sometimes, to find yourself, you have to lose control first. And yet, there are still nights when I wonder if I really let go, or if some part of me is still standing in front of that mirror, waiting. Waiting to feel that strange sense of peace again. Waiting to step into that other life that once felt so natural. Sometimes, when the wind moves through the empty hallway, I almost hear her voice again, calm, certain, whispering, "You switched roles, but maybe this was always who you were meant to be." I never answer. I just smile faintly, knowing that somewhere between who I was and who I became, there's a truth I'm still learning to live with. Because in a way, I didn't lose control of my life that day, I just finally stopped pretending I had it. And that realization, quiet and haunting, is something I'll carry with me forever.